should see everything on the monitor.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay, so as some of you guys are aware, we're using a program called Minio to do backups of GitLab, which has been, and I can show you that. So I have, this thing is going to be super annoying. Okay, here we go. So if I go to backup, all right, so what's happening every night from GitLab is we're getting, which one of these buckets is it? I think it's this guy. This is happening every night. The tar file is coming in from GitLab and it's automated, and I've got a cleanup routine. So we've been using, what this is an S3 bucket protocol that's open source, and in our case, we're using a Helm chart. So what I've been looking at, we're backing up GitLab, but we're not backing up Nexus. And I know we talked about not backing it up, but it bothers me that we're not doing it. So I've been thinking about how to approach that in a simple way. So I've just came across the Minio. There's a client program, and I've kind of tinkered with it before, but more recently, within the last couple of weeks, I've started using it to do mirroring. And so what's kind of neat about it, I've got this program installed. It's the client. So it's MC is the client. If you type in MC, you get the help. And if I type in MC LS Dallas, let's look at Dallas. I don't want to mess around with Atlanta. So I've got the Minio running in Dallas. So I've got one bucket in Dallas right now. So let's do this. Let's back up my downloads directory with the mirror command. So first thing I'm going to do an MC make bucket Dallas / backup or downloads. Sorry. Okay, so that makes a bucket. Now I'm going to mirror my downloads directory into that bucket. Mirror is the command. So it's like source and target, just like if you're doing SCP operation. So I'm going to mirror my downloads directory, which is running here locally on my machine. And I'm going to target the Dallas bucket. And run that. And guess what? It should have mirrored that directory to Dallas. And sure enough, there it is. There's a whole bunch of files those are the files that I had running that I had in my downloads directory. Okay, so what I did, thinking about backing up Nexus, which has a lot of our binaries in there. It has all of our Helm charts. It has the Docker images and so on. So what I did with Nexus, now if you guys recall, on Tuesday I did an upgrade for Nexus. Nexus went down for a few minutes, brought it back up, and what that new Docker image has in it is the Minio program with our config file. So here's what I have. I go into, I have a version of Nexus running in the dev environment. So let me go into dev. And let's see here. If I do history, I just want to get my pods for Nexus. Okay. Okay, so there's my pod. Now, if I go into the pod, yeah, exec into the pod, I think I got that cached also. Let's see. 843. Let's go in that guy. Okay, so here I am into the pod, which has the updated Docker image that I rolled out. I also updated Nexus. I took the opportunity to do that because if you were logging into the URL for Nexus last week, you were presented with a whole bunch of vulnerability scan messages. So I went ahead and updated Nexus. That problem seems to go away. They basically push those messages out quite a bit, so we have to keep on. It does give us the incentive to keep on top of the upgrades for Nexus, so that we're not, hit with some kind of vulnerability issue. Anyway, so getting back to this, I'm inside of the pod. So here we go. I can run the MC command right from this dev pod. So if I run MC and I do a listing of Dallas, it shows all the buckets. Okay, so what I can do with this is I can use that mirror command and I can mirror out the Helm repository and its database. So Helm has two things that they are recommending to back up: the blob store, which has all the binary artifacts, and then the database, which has a description of what the blob stores have in it. So in order for me to run the mirror, I could mirror the database first, or excuse me, I'm going to run the blob first. So I'm going to actually, before I do that, let's create the bucket. MC make bucket Dallas, and I'm going to mirror it into something called the default bucket.
Goodbye,
Okay.
Dallas storage.
I'm sorry?
I said goodbye, Dallas storage.
Yeah, well, what I've done with Dallas is I carved out a terabyte of data for this persistent volume claim that Dallas is using, so I'd have enough room to work with, just to give us the flexibility if we want to use this. But
Sure. No, it's cool. So
yep. Okay, so here's my mirror command. I'm going to mirror the blob directory, which has everything in it, and it's going to go out to Dallas. The overwrite basically says, hey, overwrite any file that might be named the same, and then the remove will clean up anything and to kind of keep things in sync. And the one thing that's cool about this mirror command is it only is moving the deltas over. So if you imagine, like, if we were to do this in production, which is where I'm going with this, the blob
literally,
store, it would take forever, right? It's going to take a hell of a long time to copy everything over, and you would want to do that with every command. Like if we were to script this, here it is running the mirror as I discuss what this mirror is doing. It would only have to copy the deltas over. So if we were to mirror it out the first time from production, it would take probably a day because there's 300 gigabytes of data right now. But the next day, it shouldn't take as long. It should only look at the deltas and copy those over.
Is it file level, object level, block level, deltas?
It looks like it's like at a file level. So if a new file shows up in a directory that you want to mirror over, it's just going to copy that over. But if I make a change in a text file, I know it doesn't copy that over because Mike and I tried that earlier this week. Okay, so now that guy's mirrored over, let me mirror over the database. So before I do that, let me create my bucket because I deleted it this morning. So I'm doing MC make bucket Dallas. What am I going to call this guy? Backup. Okay.
Yeah, so the question was, does it do incremental changes to a file? And the answer is no, it changes the whole file. It updates the whole file.
Right. Yep, that's correct. That's right. All right, so if I look at Dallas, I should see my default, which is my blobs. This is what it looks like in Nexus, all your blob stores. What I did, and I'll show you what's in Nexus in a second, and then I'll tear down, destroy Nexus, and restore it. And then here's the information of the contents of the backup, which it's a database that describes what's in the blobs. So what's in Nexus right now, this is the dev version. If I browse around, and this browse, I don't think it worked properly in the previous version, and the upgrade seems to fixed it nicely. So I've got some Helm, I've shoved some Helm charts in there. I put some Docker images in there. And then let's see, what else did I put in? Just to play around with raws. Let's see, I put an image in there of some dogs staring at us, waiting for lunch. And then, so now everything should be mirrored over to Dallas. Now what I want to do is I want to destroy the dev instance of Nexus by doing Helm. Let's do a Helm list first. And there's Nexus. So I'm going to do a Helm, delete, tech purge, Nexus. And Nexus should, let me think here before I do this. Got everything backed up. All right, let's do it. And let's see if I do kube get PVC and I look at the Nexus. The data is gone. So if somebody were to accidentally run that command in production or delete the namespace, boom, all your blobs are toast. I mean, Nexus in theory is gone right now. It is gone in the dev environment. Okay, so now let me bring it back to life. Actually, I could just prove that it's gone. I mean, trust me. Once that persistent volume claim is gone, it's gone. And if I go here, boom, my certificate is gone. So now let me restore this guy. So go into home, to, there we go. Let me go in. Crap. I think I have it cached. Okay, cool. So 837, and it shouldn't take too long to restore this. Rerun that. And then the persistent volume claim is going to come back. It's back, but there's no data in it. Trust me, there's nothing in there. And then what we'll do is we'll kind of watch the pods. The pods need to kind of come back to life. There's two pods. Well, there's one pod. There's one pod, and there's two Docker containers that run inside of it. One is there's a proxy that runs inside of Nexus, and then there's like the Nexus server. So the proxy will spin up pretty quickly. That's why we get 1 out of 2. And then the other one takes a little bit longer to spin up. That's the actual server. So we can actually watch the logs. Nexus. And then the container is called Nexus. There we go. So it's firing up. Nexus is written in Java, and I can tell you that it uses OSGI, which, by the way, ONAS uses the same technology. I could just tell by this log statement, this Felix container. Felix is an OSGI Java framework. So let that spin up. Once it spins up, what I'm going to do is follow the restore notes that I have here. Okay, it should almost be done. And then what we'll just do is we'll just sit here and want to wait for it to say 2 out of 2. Because what's happening now is Kubernetes is running the health checks against Nexus. And once the health checks pass, you'll get a 2 out of 2. Okay, got it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside of that guy and run the restore. So let's do get, or just do a history. I think I got a fairly long exec thing in there. So we'll run 859, which I'll get an error. And let's grab this guy here. Okay, I'm back in. Okay, so now I'm going to run the restore process. So first thing I do is, now this comes from the Nexus notes out on the internet. This basically shows how to do the restore. And I've tried to simplify that as much as possible, and I'll get into the simplification idea in just a second. So what this move thing will do is stop the service from running. So if I run ps -ef, it's running that Java process, and the pkill stop that process. And then let's see here. If I go in, and then if I run the check again, Java should stop, and it has stopped. And now the notes want me to remove everything under the backups, which I know is empty. And just from experience, I know it's empty. If I go to blobs, go to default, and I'm going to remove everything in here. And then I'm going to back up one more time, and go to database, and then remove everything here. Now I can mirror, just reverse the target and source, just mirror everything back in. So I'm going to mirror the blob back first. You can see it's running. And hopefully I won't, this is running in Greenville, so it's backing up from Dallas back to Greenville.
Okay, so Bill, just as a quick thought here, let's say you want to install Nexus totally somewhere else. You could just install it, let's say AWS, for example, or Google Cloud. You could just install it there and just pull backups from what you have here and reload it, all that data.
I think that, yeah, I think that would work. I do think that would work. I mean, in this, you would have to have the Minio client inside of that, just like this one has, to run the backup the way I've set this up. And I'm going to show you, after I get done with the backup, I want to show you why I think this mirroring concept is better than what the Nexus recommendation is for backup. And I'll get in that in just a second. Let me just do the restore process. All right, so the backup should be done, and I'm just going to basically bring that Java process back up. And then the Java process is back up, and let me get out of this guy. Now, if I look at the logs, it should be running, basically recovering. So when I put the backup, when I mirror the database files back into this restore, that is a special directory for Nexus to basically recover the database. So it needs to go through its recovery mode, and then, okay, what happened there? Oh, it's still going. I'm getting disconnected from the container. Okay, it's running the restore. And it should also recover the username and passwords, basically everything that was there. Okay, it should be done. So if I reload, the Helm chart brings back everything, including the cert. And then I should be able to log back in. Okay, and are the dogs back? The dogs are back. Are my Helm charts back? Yes, I had one Tomcat Helm chart in there, and then if I browse for Docker, there are the Docker images. They are back. Okay, so let's take a look at. All right, so what Nexus is proposing to do in their documentation, if you look at how they want you to do the backup, they want you to tar up that blob directory, okay, and the database. The database files are very small. The blob is huge. Okay, so this is production. This is our Cleveland. We have Nexus running in Cleveland. What you just saw was a Nexus instance running in Greenville. The one in Cleveland right now is consuming 32% of its allocated persistent volume claim space. Now, if we were to tar up that blob to do the backup and move the tar off site, I mean, the whole idea here is to get this data off site, off of the pod in case there's an issue with the pod and we have to recover. If we were approaching, let's say if we were over 50%, we couldn't do a backup of a tar. We could not take a tar because then you would exceed the persistent volume claim threshold. But what this is allowing me to do is not consume any extra space in Nexus because I'm mirroring everything over the network. Does that make sense? So that's why I was like, I've been concerned about we're not doing a backup in Nexus. One of the reasons I've not been, aggressively looking at it is because I always was aware of this problem. I'm like, this is a big problem just to copy the tar file over. With the mirroring, now I haven't tried it in a grand scale where I'm just looking at it in a small scale because I only have a few Docker containers. But if we do the large scale and everything works out, then we would have a copy of all of the Docker containers and so on that are in Cleveland. And this can be scripted. So I think that the way that they had it with the tar file, it would be harder to script. But you can see here that I have the backup notes and then my restore notes. I wrote it in such a way that we could run a cron job on, let's say, node 1, and as long as we know the pod name, which changes, if we know that pod name, then this type of a mirror command could run nightly. And I have this same concept running with GitLab's backup. So GitLab has its own automated backup that goes to the S3 bucket, but the cleanup is got something like this that I added on to our GitLab installation. So I'm just like executing scripts every night to basically keep 10 days worth of data in the S3 bucket. Now, another thing that is interesting about, which is really cool about this mirroring, you could mirror. I guess I don't want to run it right here, but I could run an MC. If I do an MC listing of backup, which is this, oops, let's see. Oh, did I get booted out? Let me just run it here. MC listing of backup. This is Atlanta's backup. So that's everything. That's where our GitLab backups are. And that's pretty much how we're backing up right now to Atlanta. If I were to run MC mirror, I could run, I don't want to run this, but MC, because I don't want to run this because it's going to exceed my bandwidth. I only have 3 megs up. But if I do an MC mirror of backup / GitLab backups, and I had the appropriate bucket in Dallas, I could mirror all of our GitLab backups from Dallas, from Atlanta to Dallas, and vice versa. So before Paul rebuilt Atlanta and then Dallas, I really wanted to make sure that I had the backup, the tar files for GitLab. Well, I mean, I downloaded it just to make sure that I had a copy in case something happened. But this would have been, I didn't know about this mirroring command at the time. Had I known about it, I could just run the mirror command and then mirror Atlanta to Dallas and then wait for Paul to get to Dallas and then do the reverse. And then I would make sure I always had a backup. But basically something like this would back up, would mirror the Atlanta GitLab to Dallas. So anyway, that's it.
Cool. So a lot to consider in that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about backups of Nexus before. And some things we talked about before as well. We are constantly building to this repository, and we can recover by building things again, running them through our pipeline. It wouldn't be as quick of a recovery, obviously, as that would. But we're also having to lock down GitLab during that period of time while you're doing a recovery, because it seems like that would be a major issue to be trying to deploy things to Nexus while it's recovering and wiping out maybe what's there.
That's true.
However, some other things come to mind are, I'm not clear on how Nexus stores its blob information, but typical of anything that's sort of database, like where there are incremental transactions that are being committed, you have to quiesce, however you say it, the database before you can do a backup.
Yeah, so there's a procedure for doing the for preparing the database for backup that basically you do like a SQL dump of it. Nexus has a procedure for doing this, for doing a backup of the database.
And it didn't sound like that's what was followed here, though. This was just a live update. So you could be in the midst of updating something in a live stream that's being incrementally updated by it, and the thing you recover may not be usable.
I wasn't. Yes, but we did discuss that we would have to script this to do that.
So you'd have to shut it down to then create a backup, to then move the backup off, and then the reverse would also have to be true.
Well, I don't think you have to do the shutdown. It's not like Oracle where you had to, put it in a freeze. But there is a process, and both, Bill and I looked at that, and I guess Bill, you didn't show it us doing it on this demo, probably for time. It did take some time to do it, but that's accounted for in whatever the go forward process would be.
Right.
So, go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say one other thing to factor in, just doing a quick brain dump, is there's also an epic in this current release for distributed artifact cache, where we distribute Nexus to every access pod.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not to say that this mitigates that need, because only those things which have been accessed would be cached. But there is, in fact, that to consider in this process and the efficiencies of it. So the other thing I would say is that holistically, there's a lot that could be backed up, and that needs to be a ranked, sorted list of things that should be backed up. Not everything should be backed up, right? And backing up usernames and passwords as a side benefit of this just kind of points out, well, why are we not leveraging some sort of external centralized access mechanism rather than local usernames and passwords in this? Because even deploying a chart, it's not good to just put usernames and passwords in the chart so that it's deployed at that time. So just some ideas that are coming to mind as I think through some of the scenarios.
Sure. Yeah, and I think Nexus does have LDAP. We haven't used it, but it has LDAP means of authentication. No, I guess we wouldn't, if we were to use something like this, we wouldn't want to use the corporate LDAP because I would imagine that would require some big hoops to get through, but we could probably run our own. One other reason that I started thinking about backing up Nexus is because we talked, we haven't done this yet, but we have talked about mirroring, let's say, apps. See if you could see on my screen, you could create a proxy for apt and so on. You could create a proxy for lots of different types of blob stores. Imagine the case where we're mirroring apt. And the whole idea of that mirror is that you pull in and cache
Sure.
all those app or those Debian packages into Nexus. And the whole idea is if the third party source on the internet that has it goes away, we have a cache, right?
Yeah.
Now, if we're not backing up that cache and that third party goes away, you've lost your Debian package, right?
Mhm.
So
That's
sorry,
that's
just gonna say if the plan is to distribute Nexus, and
I can
Joe,
barely hear you, Aaron.
sorry, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, a little bit. Yes.
So I was just going to say, if the plan is to distribute Nexus, and Joe, you mentioned that only something that had been accessed would be cached.
Right. You could
But-
do a push.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's like some sort of setup within Nexus to have eventual consistency across all instances, right? So if it's
Maybe.
accessed on one, eventually it will be pushed to the others. So it's just a matter of time before everything is distributed and backed up. essentially.
Right. And I don't know. And so if we were to do something like push, it would look more like what Bill's representing here if it doesn't have a native capability. Otherwise, it's just a cache pointing to a cache pointing to a cache. And then things, show up as things are used.
Right.
So we don't know the answer to these things. So I'm just pointing these out. So it's an issue. It needs to be looked at holistically. And it needs to be considered holistically what the implications are to the pipeline for this. And simply doing a live blob update probably wouldn't be a reliable backup because things are constantly moving in flight. So you have to take things possibly offline. There's a lot of implications here. And so given the nature of this and the other things that need to be backed up as well, things like considered KORG data. That's pretty important. There's a few records that are out there that we need to persist, that there be some kind of backup and recovery strategy that we're looking at holistically, and that is approached in a risk return effort kind of view, where we then approach those problems by attacking that list. This is certainly on the list, and the things you're pointing out are valid, Bill.
Yeah. So one other thing that I was, wanted to present this today as a proof of concept, and I certainly haven't taken any action in production with this sort of thing, but I just wanted to make sure that you are aware of it as an option for a backup.
Yeah, it's cool.
And another thing is, the way that the persistent volume claim size is currently set up with the version of Kubernetes we're running in Cleveland, I cannot resize that persistent volume claim. It's set to 1 terabyte and we're using 300 gigs. And if we were to cache a lot of third-party things that I'm going to need more space, I don't have a way of resizing that. I think the mirroring would allow me to do that because I could bring up another copy of Nexus with a larger persistent volume claim and then mirror the information back into it, because the mirroring has no concept of the size of the volume, right?
Yeah, you could do a local mirror for that matter.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Could do that. Anyway, so that's what I had for.
Yeah, I like the technology. So some questions. I'm sorry, was it MC? What was the command you were?
It's called Mini. MC is the command. Minio is the technology.
Right.
And
is it? Go ahead.
No.
It just works with S3 targets.
Yeah, it's an S3 protocol. It implements S3 protocol.
Cool.
Oh, and here's another thing I thought was kind of neat with Nexus. So check this out. If I were to create,
So,
go ahead.
well, I just had go ahead and finish, but I had some questions about the S3. So it sounds like it's an object store model. Is the source and the target presumed to be S3, or is it file? Can it mix file?
It's just what it. Yeah, I mean it's S3. Whatever S3 does behind that REST API, I don't know. I mean, I'd have to watch some videos and so on to figure out exactly what that.
Yeah, but the source and the target are required to be S3.
No. If you just saw it just a second ago, I mirrored my directory.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. So it's only
Right.
the target that's S3.
No, that's not true, because when I mirrored it back
Yeah,
to a local directory.
That's because you were running it local though, so it's kind of like the target is the source. But in any case, I got you. It can mix. It can mix file and
exactly, which I thought was pretty neat, because I thought, because I'm like, that'd be kind of neat if I could just mirror some directory on my local machine, and sure enough, that worked. One other thing I wanted to point out here is what I noticed in Nexus is if I create a repository, and this is dev, so don't worry. If I create, let's see if it works with this. Maybe it's not going to work with that one. Let's try a Docker hosted, which you already have. Oh, but the heck was or maybe it was a blob store. Create a blob store. Okay, here we go. Here's where it is. So we're using the file blob store with Nexus. So meaning it's running to the local disk when we're putting stuff into Nexus. There's actually this S3 option where if you were firing stuff at Nexus, it could, behind the scenes, write your data out to S3, an S3 bucket, which, it would be pretty slow, I would think, because it would be happening over the network. And I try to get this S3 blob store to work with Minio because, we're not subscribing to AWS. I could not get it to work. I tried a little bit and I got frustrated with it, and then found the mirroring thing, and I moved on with the mirroring. But I thought, just be aware that this is in here. Like, you can create a blob store to S3. Anyway, so that's all I had to share.
But since we're writing to sender and to Helm anyway, it's as a local file store. It's kind of redundant unless that S3 were to reside off-site on another.
Right, that would be the idea, because I think what S3 is also able to do is you can copy data amongst data centers, right? Isn't that the way Amazon does it? Like when you write something to S3, it's not just going to one data center. It's like being spread across a region or an availability zone.
Yeah, it's distributed per region.
And there is abilities to do that with OpenStack Cinder that we haven't really utilized.
You can export Ceph as S3.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
Cool, man. I dig it. Shoot, I had some other questions, but that's cool. Anyone else?
Joe, I want to show the demo on link status reporting.
Please do, sir.